So first of all, sorry for you all. The last class, I cancelled the class due to some unavoidable circumstances. And even the last Tuesday class, I told you that I will sometime I may have to cancel the class. So due to some unavoidable circumstances, I couldn't conduct the class last Saturday. But anyhow, since we have covered some 2 additional class that may compensate the cancellation of the last class. So having that note, I'm going to start the continuation of the corporate governance. In the last Tuesday class, we have started the corporate governance, and we have studied about several subtopics in the corporate governance. So first we have seen about what is corporate governance. I just wanted to reiterate for a simple understanding. If anybody wanted to have a simple understanding about the corporate governance, it is about how to manage the company. So corporate governance prescribe or elaborate some rules and regulations on how to run the company or how to manage the company. That is the simple understanding of corporate governance, and we have discussed about it, and then we have discussed about some definitions. So if there is any questions in the exam paper for 2 marks or 5 marks, it's better to write a definition. So if they ask what is corporate governance, better to write the definition or just understand. So that is we have discussed about, and then we have discussed what are the benefits of corporate from the corporate governance, and then we just discussed about 2 thoughts of school of thoughts. First one is rule-based approach. The rule-based approach is simple way we can say that it is based on the any particular prevail laws or law. These rules are these corporate governance rules are published. So it is common to applicable to all the institutions coming under their corporate governance. So that is sort of rule based, and the policy base is not the rule base. It is they are just broadly elaborate some policies. So it is everybody need not to it is not compulsory for the institutions. So if it is a comply or explain policy, so they can comply, or otherwise if they could not comply, they can explain it why they could not comply. So to whom they have to explain? They have to explain to the stakeholders, especially shareholders of the company, through the annual report or through annual general meeting. Then after that, we have discussed about the code of best practices in Sri Lanka, where I have mentioned that 2 regulators, SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, which is a regulator for capital market, that also issued a code of best practices for companies listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange. And then the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, particularly the Bank Supervision Department of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, issued another code of best practices or corporate governance through its direction, how this finance, particularly the bank, has to conduct their corporate governance practices. So those are the 2 available code of best practices in Sri Lanka, mainly available. And other than that, of course, I think the bank non-bank supervision department of the central bank also issued for the finance companies, but I have not I don't have the intention to discuss that, because this is more or less similar to the bank supervision one, that means the bank one. So I don't have the intention to discuss that in this class. And then after that, we have discussed about some general practices or internationally accepted practices or concept on the following topic. What is the board of directors and board of directors responsibilities and balanced board and executive and non-executive directors, independent directors, chairman and CEOs? What are the difference between those 2 people, and the chairman's role in conducting the board and its business? and then appointment of the board. So these are the things we have discussed in the last class. So if you'll have any questions, you can ask. I'm ready to answer. If you'll have any questions in the last class of corporate governance, you can ask the question. Any doubt or any sort of comments? You can just, as usual, you can even unmute the microphone and ask from me, or otherwise you can chat through the inbox. Okay, since you all don't have the questions, I'm just asking for the some clarification, just for a clarification. Whether a chairman of the board of directors, generally a chairman of the board of directors should be a executive director or non-executive director. Whether the chairman will be a executive director or non-executive director. We have discussed this concept last class. I just asked whether you have understand the things and you have gone through the subject. So just ask. You can tell the answer. Whether the chairman is executive or non-executive.
Non-executive. Non-executive.
Yeah, exactly. Non-executive director. Because chairman normally not get involved with the day-to-day operation of a company. Okay. Then today, as a first topic, I have divided today's class into two main topics. The first one is in the first half session, I'm going to discuss about the code of best practices on corporate governance for listed companies in Sri Lanka. Actually, this is the corporate governance rules published by the Securities and Exchange Commission along with the Chartered Institute of Sri Lanka. And if you see that the history, their corporate governance history from first they have published in 1997, and then time to time they have amended it, and then this is applicable to 2013. I think 2017 also some records say they have issued or they have tried to amend it, but this corporate governance rules are based on 2013. And recently in 2021 March, they came up with new set of rules on corporate governance, and they just published that for a stakeholders opinion, to get the stakeholders opinion, but still not they have not finalized yet. So since they have not finalized the new corporate governance rules, so it's still applicable is the 2013 one. If you go through the SEC website, you can see that the currently available one is 2013. So based on that, there are some corporate governance rules prescribed under several topics. So I have just taken some important topics and some important principle which we can discuss today's class, and that will give some understanding to you all about the corporate governance rules or code of corporate governance rules published by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The first one, it says that every company, the principle A1, which are the rules related to the directors or board of directors. So the first one saying that every public company should be headed by an executive board, effective board, which should direct, lead, and control the company. So this is the first thing. Actually, this is sort of objective, related to the objective of the corporate governance. So they just saying that every public company should be headed by, or it should be managed by the effective board, and that effective board of directors should direct, lead, and control the company. So which we have discussed in the last class. So I think I need not to explain much about this. this is one of the things. So they prescribe that, okay, if the company listed in the Columbus Stock Exchange, so there should be a board of directors, and the board of directors should be in charge to the managing that company. That is the first one. The second rule, so second principle says that there are two key tasks on the top of every public company: conducting of the business of the board and facilitating executive responsibility for the management of the company's business. Here, of course, we have already discussed that even in the any company or any listed company, the board of directors has to have two functions. Mainly, there are two functions. The first function is conducting the the business of board of directors. So actually, what is the conducting the business of board of the board is mean time to time they have to have a board meeting, and they have to discuss the company's strategies, and they have to discuss on how to achieve the company's objectives and all. So that is conducting the business of board. So who will be in charge for this conducting business of the board? Generally, the chairman should be, because the chairman's role, the last class we have seen that chairman role, one of the main role of the chairman is conducting the board. So he has to make sure that though everybody, all the members, all the board of directors are contributing for a decision making function of the board. So the conducting the business of the board is one of the main function. That is one task. And the second one is facilitating executive responsibilities for management of the company's business. Okay, first conducting the board and then facilitating executive responsibilities. To facilitating executive responsibilities, board time to time, they will appoint the key management personnel to the company, and like DGM, EGM, Chief Risk Officer, Compliance Officer, like that. And time to time, they will just formulate the policies for day-to-day operation of the companies. And time to time, they will review the progress of those things and make sure that implementation of those policies in the day-to-day business. So facilitating executive responsibilities. Generally, there's another person, the important person in the board of directors, who will in charge to, who will be the representative of these executive functions. Who is that? Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the company. So the two key tasks of any public company is conducting the business, chairman will be in charge, and facilitating executive responsibility, Chief Executive Officer will be in charge for that function. And there should be a clear division of responsibilities at the head of the company, which will ensure balance of power and authority such that no one individual has unfettered the power of decision or influence the power of decision. So this is, they are always mentioning that. Actually, there are questions in the past papers also. This balancing the power in a board is important. That's why there are some composition. There are some rules related to composition. There should be this number of executive director, this number of non-executive director. Out of non-executive director, this number of independent directors, because to maintain the sort of balance of power, and that will prevent, okay, proper composition will prevent any group of directors influencing the decision making power. So it will give sort of balanced power. And it is always mentioning that there should be a clear division of responsibilities between the chairman and CEOs of the company. Okay, so there should be something, okay, what are the functions chairman can do and what are the functions CEOs can do. So there should be a clear division of responsibility. And the third one is chairman's role is preserving good corporate governance is crucial. Actually, the corporate governance should be start as a tone at the top. So the chairman's role of preserving good corporate governance is crucial. As a person responsible for running the board, the chairman should preserve order and facilitate the effective discharge of board function. This is, I think, we have already discussed under the best practices, international best practices. The chairman is in charge or responsible to facilitate the proper function or balance effective discharge of board function. That means all the board of directors has to contribute for the decision making function. Okay, these are the three principles. I think there are more, and which also related to the board of directors. The board should ensure the availability within those with a sufficient financial knowledge to offer the guidance on matters of finance. This is important, and especially finance, sort of finance institution is important, but even for other companies, it is much important that the board should have the ensure the ability within it the sufficient financial knowledge to offer the guidance, because actually in case of finance institution, board should make sure that there are people, those who have the financial knowledge. There are directors, those who have the risk management knowledge. Okay, so balance board will make sure that balance. So the sufficient financial knowledge person should guide the matters related to the finance. That is also ensured. So actually, these are some of the best practices the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, wanted for a listed company. And the fifth one is, it is preferable for a board to have a balance of executive and non-executive director, such that no individual or small group of individuals can nominate the board decision taking. This is actually again and again this concept is emphasized. The balance, there should be a balanced board. Balanced board, what is the meaning of balanced board? There should be a diversification in the board. That means executive direct, some are executive, some are non-executive, some are independent, some in the gender balance and experiences balance, age balances. Some are old people, some are new generation, young people, like that. There should be a diversified composition in the board of directors. And they say that because why they are again and again emphasizing the diversification in the board or balance in the board, because then a small group cannot dominate the board decision making power. Why they are concerned on it? Because if a small group dominate the decision making, first thing is that decision making may be biased. For example, you may say that in a bank, okay, there are some executive directors, and they are dominating because since they know in a bank. For example, in a bank, you take in a bank, assume a bank where the executive directors are some executive directors are there. Then since they know the knowledge about the in and out about the banking business, they can dominate the particular board decision making, because they can say that no, this one they are like that. But but there should be another strong non-executive directors, and there should be if there are strong independent directors, then they also can contribute. And other thing is, why they are expecting the independent director? Because some independent view should be there in the decision making power. So actually, the corporate governance is matter of decision making ultimately. So to ensure the effective decision making process, they say that it is preferable the board to have the balance of executive and non-executive director. For example, another example, let's assume it's a bank, and executive directors control the board, and their bank some business decision went wrong, or they have granted a loan to some some business entities which are related to or due to some negligence of DGM in charge to credit that loan went bad, or they could not make a proper recovery from that particular sizable loan, then what will happen in the decision making? These executive directors may influence the board or may try to dominate the decision making of the board. Okay, because this is not because of the any senior management fault or inefficiency. This is naturally it went wrong, and we can write off or something to manage that, to hide their mistakes. But if they are a balanced board, of course, then the independent directors and non-executive directors would have contributed. They say that no, look, you can. This is because of this, and we have to change the some DGM level, or we have to transfer this to some other division and has to expedite the recovery or something. So they can contribute for a effective decision making. So that is why it says that preferable for a board to have the balance between executive and non-executive director. And the board should be provided timely information in a form and the quality appropriate to enable to its discharge of duty. This is we have already seen, I think. The last class we have discussed. When the board of members and under some circumstances, he can rely on the information obtained from outside or obtained from the officers. But this board should give provided timely information. Actually, when some loans are going bad, the credit risk is the main risk for the bank. So if something goes wrong or some sectors are getting affected, so they have to give the board has to be informed timely and appropriate manner to discharge their duty. And there should be a formal and transparent procedure for appointment a new director to that. This is also one of the other important thing. I think in the central bank direction, you may get other, you may have other more some rules on this appointing the new director to the board. Because otherwise, what the bank, because generally what is the problem in the company is the owners are different from the managing people, directors, because the people, those who are managing the companies are not the real owners. So they can manipulate, there can be several issues to manage the thing. One issue is the board of directors, what they can try to control themselves. So group of board of directors try to control themselves, try to control the board. What they can do is they can appoint some new directors which are, and they are friends, or they are unknown people, and all they can just appoint it, and by that they can just try to enhance their power to decision making, to dominate the decision making. So there should be a transparent procedure to the appointed board of the new directors to the board. And all directors should be required to submit themselves for re-election at a regular intervals, at least once in 3 years. Because once they are appointed as a director at the AGM level, they can't continue as it is. So what they are doing is they have to what this code of conduct, the corporate governance code emphasizes, they have to at least once in 3 years they have to go for a re-election. So in the re-election at the AGM, then if the shareholder doesn't like the director or his performance, then the shareholders can change the director. So it will give sort of more freedom to the shareholders to appoint or select, to appoint the good directors to the board. And the principle 9 says that board should periodically appraise their own performance in order to ensure that board responsibilities are satisfactorily discharged. So they have to periodically appraise their own performance. And shareholders should be kept advised of relevant detail in respect of directors. Because whatever the directors' transactions and all has to be informed to the shareholders through annual report and all. The board should be required at least annually to assess the performance of CEOs. Because in the most of the boards, CEOs are the more powerful because they are the representative of the executive people, and ultimately executive people run the bank or institutions, any company. So actually what they have to do is they have to assess the performance of CEOs, and they have to have the proper succession plan for CEOs. And if they, I mentioned to you in the last class, one of the bank, they just inform, okay, after 2 years, this present CEO will resign or retire, and this man will come as a new CEO. So proper transition proper. So those things are related at the sum of the code related to directors. So board should have at least annually to assess the performance of CEO. I think these are the code related to the directors and particularly the function of board of directors. If you will have any question, you can ask. Because I think this is something boring subject, maybe because it's sort of rules. So you'll have to just have an understanding. Actually, these are not related to the directly connected to the exam, but I have always I am emphasizing that getting knowledge is one of the objective. Okay, one of the core objective of the of the study. So it's better to you all know to know, okay, these are the things. And when in the exam papers, you can just connect it to this concept and write the answers. Actually end of this class we will see one of the exam paper questions. So at that time you will understand how can we connect these things to the exam answers. Okay, there is another code related to the director's remunerations, because director's remuneration is one of the other area where frauds can happen. Not in Sri Lanka, in other countries, US, UK, and some other Western countries, you can see the director's remuneration is much high when the company earning more profits. Maybe in Sri Lanka also, I don't know about it, but in the Western countries, we know that the news are coming. When companies earning huge profits, then directors will get some bonuses and all. So this is one of the area. There are the code of governance are emphasizing some rules. Yeah. The first one is company should establish a formal and transparent procedure for developing policy on executive remuneration and for fix the remuneration package of individual directors. No director should involve in deciding his or her own remuneration. Okay, so the board of director, what they have to do is they have to first formulate the policy. Actually, in the companies, because company is an artificial person, so there should be a written policies. Because a person can be there, a director can be there, or today and cannot be there, or tomorrow he won't be there. But the company will exist, the bank will exist. So there should be a written policy. The people can change, but policies there should be consistency in the policy. So first they have to do is they have to develop the policy on executive remuneration and fixing the remuneration packages of individual directors. So why I say that it's important, because this is one of the area some mistakes or some concerns or some issues arise in the corporate governance. Generally, directors fix their salaries, especially executive directors fix their salaries in a very high. This is you can just there's a first rule is there should be a policy, and there should be a remuneration package has to be decided for each and every directors. And the second one is level of remuneration of both executive and non-executive director should be sufficient to attract and remain the directors needed to run the company successfully. The proportion of executive directors remuneration should be structured to link rewards of the corporate and individual performance. Okay, this is the other one. First one, there should be a policy and there should be thing. And then they are saying that, okay, but anyhow, the level of remuneration should be adequate to the executive and non-executive director. It should be an attractable factor, because why these executive directors are functioning, because there should be a compensation in the sense that when they are providing their time, it has to be compensated. And so they have to have proper remuneration package, and it should be structured to link to the rewards of the corporate or individual performance. Okay, I'm just asking because the class, maybe the class is going boring. I just asking, what is the most valuable thing in the world? What is the most valuable thing in the world? What is the most valuable thing in the world?
Time.
Yes, exactly. The time is the most valuable thing in the world. You can maybe the human life also one thing, but the time is most valuable thing, because if you lost the time, you won't earn that, because in your lifespan there will be a specific time. Okay, so actually what we are doing is we are just giving our time to the to our institutions and getting some remunerations or some compensation or salaries. So when we are giving our time to the institution, we have to think whether what is our per hour paid, per hour value. So okay, I mean, I'm giving the 1 hour, what is our 1 hour value for this? And that's what this now proper this personal finance saying that actually we have to create some passive income method, and that will have that will be a more better way than giving our time and getting salaries, because active income, because there's a restriction. But if we could able to create some passive income, that may be a good way to manage the time or just your time. Okay, having that thought, I'm moving to the third principle. The company's annual report should be contain statement of remuneration policy and the detail of remuneration of the board as a whole. So in the annual report, there should be a this remuneration policy, as well as what is the detail of remuneration of the board. It means the remuneration of the board director should be disclosed to the shareholders. So these are the three principles, the main principles related to the director's remuneration of a company. If you have any question, you can ask, or otherwise I'll move to the next one, the code related to the relations with the shareholders. Before going to that, if you have any question, you can ask. Is anybody working in the stock brokering firms? OSCC? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just asked because I just wanted to know what's happening in the stock market. The stock market is sort of going a unusual path. So I just wanted to know what's really happening there. That's what I just asked, whether is anybody. Okay. Then this code related to the relations with the shareholders. The first one is the first principle says that board should use the annual general meeting to communicate, AGM to communicate with the shareholders, and should encourage their participation, especially in the listed companies. Other than main shareholders, the small shareholders may not pay more attention to participate in the AGMs. and decision and vote for them and all. So the board should encourage their participation. And the second one is board should implement the effective communication with shareholders, which is very important. Actually, the shareholders, they are the people, these board of directors function on behalf of the shareholders. So the board should implement effective communication with the shareholders and their performance and their business, how they are conducting business, and the performance of the company has to be properly communicated to the shareholder. That is the one way is the annual report. Annual report, their financial performance and their other performance are communicated to the shareholders through annual report and AGM. Further, to complying the requirement under the Companies Act, Securities and Exchange Commission laws and Columbus Stock Exchange regulation as applicable, directors should disclose to shareholders all proposed material transaction which, if entered into, would materially alter vary the company's net asset base, or in case of company with a subsidiary and considerable. So if there is any material transaction, okay, other than this Companies Act and Securities Exchange Commission rules, directions and all, but if the director feel that it is an important transaction which may influence the net asset value of the company, then they have directors has the duty to disclose to the shareholders. And then again, other one is quote related to the accountability and audit. The board should present a balanced and understandable assessment of company's financial position and performance and prospects. This is first thing. Because ultimate objective of the company may be earning money or making profit. So balance, board should present the balance and understandable assessment of the company's financial position, and they had to have good analysis and they had to have an assessment on that, whether it is adequate enough or it is not enough, and all they have to have. And the second principle is board should have a process of risk management and a sound system of internal control to safeguard the shareholders' investment, the company's assets. So, with related to the audit, since it's related to the audit, they say that the board of directors should have sound risk management system. So, under that only, they are having appointing the chief risk officer and centralized risk management system and all sort of. And other than that, they should have internal control system. Because internal control system is must. That will be the first line of defense to safeguard the from the risk. So there should be the board should have process of risk management and internal control system to safeguard the shareholders' investment and the company's asset. If there are no proper internal control system, of course, company may making the losses, and that may affect the asset base of the company. And broadly, risk management and internal control is the process affected by the company's board of directors and management decision to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of company's objective. Okay, and the principle 3 is the board should establish formal and transparent arrangement for considering how they should select and apply accounting policies, financial reporting and internal control principle, and maintaining the appropriate relationship with the company auditors. So actually this code is related to the audit function and accounting function of the company. So they have to have sort of establish a formal and represent arrangement to considering the accounting policy selections and all, and financial reporting and internal control principles and all. Actually, the next section we will start the financial reporting and auditing, where we will study these things in detail manner. And other one is the companies must adopt a code of business conduct ethics for directors and key management personnel, and must promptly disclose any waiver of the code for directors and others. and directors should be required to disclose extent to which the company established principle and practice of corporate governance. So these all related to the accountability and audit of the corporate governance. Okay, I think this is all about Securities and Exchange Commission's the code of corporate governance, some rules. Actually, there are several, but I have selected some are related to directors and they are the remunerations, and some code related to the shareholders and accountability and audit one, which are somewhat related to this our topic. So that I have just summarized it, and this is nothing too much explain. So I just read it and explain somewhat. So if you have any questions, we can discuss, you can ask, we can discuss that, or otherwise we can move to the corporate governance for licensed bank, which is particularly important for our topic today's one. Any questions? Okay, as I mentioned already, the corporate governance code of corporate governance rules has been released by two regulators. First one is SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, which is applicable for all the listed companies. And the second regulator, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, particularly the Bank Supervision Department of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, issued other corporate governance direction for the licensed bank. Licensed bank include two type of institution: licensed commercial banks and licensed specialized bank. So this corporate governance is applicable to the licensed banks. Actually, there are 8 principles. This is I think they also issued in 1990s, 2007. They have issued in 2007. And time to time, they have amended this direction. So if you wanted to read the India direction, you can go to the central bank website where you can see a law. Under that, if you the drop down menu is there law, and under the drop down menu, if you go to the banks, then there are bank supervision directions. Then in the direction you can find this direction, which is 2007, I think. First one they have issued 2007. So where they have they have in the principle base, they have mentioned 8 rules. The first one is responsibilities of the board. Of course, the SEC one also saying the responsibility of the boards, but these people have precisely mentioned about the responsibility of the board. So what is the difference between the SEC one and central bank one is? Main different one is SEC's one is applicable to the companies listed in stock exchange, Colombo Stock Exchange, but this is for the banks. So if the banks listed companies, or if a bank is a listed bank in the Colombo Stock Exchange, then they have to comply with both directions. But the central bank directions may be more stringent. The second principle is board composition, and third one is criteria to assess the fitness and propriety of directors. We shortly call as a fit and proper of directors. And management functions delegated to the board and chairman and chief executive officer, board appointment committee, and related party transaction and disclosure. Of course, related party transaction we have already seen. Other things we have to discuss. Under that responsibilities of board, they say that approved and oversee the strategic objective of the corporate values is the responsibility of the board. So actually, this is the primary objective of the board. they have to approve or formulate the strategic objective of the particular bank and their corporate values, and they have to approve and oversee. And second one is they have to formulate the overall business strategy, including overall risk policies. When we are studying the risk management department, we have seen that when they are first they have to decide what is their risk appetite level. Based on the risk appetite level, they can decide on the business strategies. Okay, their business risk appetite is high or low, will decide their business strategies. And third one is approve the implementation policy of the communication with all the shareholders. Every bank should have the communication policies. And particularly at the crisis time, who can communicate with the stakeholders? That is important. Actually, this is just to you. You may have some idea, just knowledge, just for a knowledge purpose. This communication policies must import. I think every bank and institution, large institution, having the communication policy. For example, if it is a central bank, everybody cannot talk about the bank. Even directors can't talk about the bank. Directors of the department. Actually, AG, the assistant governor and deputy governors only can talk about the central bank matters. And if it is the crisis time, then there will be a communication officer. It may be a DG or it may be an AG, assistant governor, and that particular communication officer only can communicate with the stakeholders. Likewise, even in a bank or any large institutions, there will be the communication policy and there will be a communication officer. For example, if for example some disaster happened to the happen and something the bank continuity, business continuities get affected. At that time, everybody cannot talk about that disaster, and that will make the things worse. So actually what they had to do is there should be a communication officer, one particular officer. He only can should communicate with the stakeholders on behalf of the bank. So that's why it says that approve the implementation of policy of communication with the stakeholders should be one of the responsibility of the board. And review the adequacy and integrity of the internal control system is again one of the responsibilities. Here you can see the similarities between the SEC1 and central bank 1. There are similarities. And identify, designate key management personnel. Who are the key management personnel in a bank? I'm just asking. Who can be the key management personnel in a bank? Yeah, that's a question. Actually, before I answer that questions, I'm asking asking the question that who can be or who are the key management personnel of a bank? Just one or two. There may be several. You can just tell one or two. Yeah, CEO, risk officer, chief risk officer, chief compliance officer, even DGM, deputy general manager, and all those people are considered as a key management personnel. Okay, so identify and designate the key management personnel is the responsibility of the board. Why they are saying it? Actually, even though board is responsible for everything, but they are the people. The board they transfer the power to the key management personnel, maybe CEOs, DGM, AGMs, and all. So the key management personnel get involved with the day-to-day operations. So okay, they can formulate any policies, they can review any policies, nice policies and all, but These are the people going to run the bank. So that key management person should be a capable and appropriate person. So in that case, they say that it's a responsibility of the board to identify and designate the key management personnel of the board. Okay, I just finished this and coming to the question. There was a question. I'll come back. Then the other one is periodically assess the effectiveness of the board director's own governance. This is also one of the requirement. Even SEC one also mentioned that the time to time they have to directors their own governance. They have to assess whether it's going in the right way, and ensure the availability of succession plan for key management personnel, which I think we have discussed enough. But for just to explain you all, this succession plan is an important for a bank, particularly the bank and finance institutions. So each and every key management personnel, there should be a succession plan. So if it is a CEO, DGM credit and the chief risk officer and all, there should be a succession plan. If something happened to that officer and it has to be that particular person has to be replaced, that officer has to be key management person has to be replaced by other person. In some banks, of course, I am always giving the example. Some banks CEOs may run the entire business activity of the bank. He will be the man, like a one-man show. If there is no particular proper succession plan, if some CEO something happened to that CEO, or if the CEO retired, or if CEO resign and go to some other institution, then this bank will have struggle. So the succession plan should be important. An exam point of view also, this is one of the important concepts. Keep it in mind because in the past paper there are questions. What is succession plan? Okay, so you have to be able to write it. So ensure the availability of the succession plan for key management personnel is one of the responsibility. And meet regularly with the key management personnel to review the policies. The board has to have the good rapport with the key management personnel and review the policies. It's one of the responsibilities of the board. And understand the regulatory environment is a most important responsibility of the bank or board, because the regulatory environment time to time getting changes. If you see that if you are in a bank, you can understand that initially they have regulators have introduced the Basel 1, then Basel 2, Basel 3. Recently they have introduced the IFRS 9. The regulatory environment getting changes. So this board of directors should have good understanding about the changing regulatory environment. That will facilitate the board to have good understanding about the banking business, dimension of the banking business and managing it. An appointment chairman and CEO and define the function of and responsibilities is the board responsibilities. And meet the this is we have seen about it. I don't explain much. The appointment of the chairman and CEO and define the function of responsibilities the board responsibility. And meet the regularly, and meeting shall be held at least 12 times a year. See, this is sort of rule based. The central bank guideline is sort of rule based corporate governance. Why I am saying this is a rule based corporate governance? Because this corporate governance is issued based on the Banking Act, based on the power given to the Monetary Board through the Banking Act. Okay, so this is sort of rule based. So because there is a prevail law which gives the power for this corporate governance. That is the first thing. And the second thing is everybody has to follow it. Okay, if it's a small bank or foreign bank or foreign bank branches in Sri Lanka or large bank or state bank, everybody has to follow this board, this code of the corporate governance rules. And other thing is, this is more precisely. They say that in this point you can see that it says that the board of directors meet regularly and meetings shall be held at least 12 times a year. So it's a rule. They have to have 12 times a year. They have to have a meetings. So the central bank corporate governance one is sort of rule-based corporate governance. Under the rule-based policy, they have issued. So you can give the 3 reasons for that why it's a rule-based. Understand? Okay. Ensure that notice of at least 7 days is given for a regular board meeting. So why it says that? Because all the there should be a chance to participate all the directors in the board of meeting. Appoint a company secretary, which is directly, and directors shall avoid conflict of interest in their activities, which is most important in the one of the responsibility in the board in a bank, because in a bank conflict of interest can easily created, because any person, any director may have involved with some other related companies, and that related companies may need to get the loans. Sometimes that companies may approach the particular bank, then the conflict of interest may create. So the director shall avoid conflict of interest in their activities, and publish annual report and annual corporate governance report. It's a must. Okay. Have you all seen the annual corporate governance report? Which is also in the annual report, you can see annual corporate governance report and risk report. So actually, just it's good for your knowledge. Just download one of the annual report of a bank and read it. There are lots of information. These corporate governance reports are available, and risk reports are available, and 3 lines of defense and all, they nicely explain. Okay, before moving to the composition, we will have any questions? Okay, since you don't have the questions, but there is a question. One of the students asked that, do the shareholders measure the performance of directors? What is your answer? Other students, what is your answer? Do the shareholders measure performance of directors? Yes, sir.
It will measure by the annual report.
Yeah, of course, it will measure by the annual report, even though there is no direct framework to measure the director's performance, but each and every, particularly the main shareholders, they will have sort of mechanism to measure the performance of the directors through their financial performance, some other performance as well, and they are giving opportunities to decide whether this director is can continue as a director or not. That's why in the SEC code of the corporate governance direction, it says that okay, time to time they have to go for a re-elections at least once in 3 years, and at that time, of course, if the particular director's performance are not good, for example, a particular director, he is in charge for the credit operations or risk management. Okay, we'll say one of the particular director, he is in charge for the risk management and risk management oversight committee and all. And that particular director, there are some issues in the risk management function of the bank. Continuously, there are repeatedly there are several issues. Then major shareholders will judge that okay, this director does not function his duty properly, so we will change the director. So to give the chance to the director, the shareholders, what they will do, the corporate governance directions or the corporate governance rule says that, okay, once in 3 years he has to go for a re-election. At that time, the major shareholders will change the director. So even
What
though
is
they are
the
sorry.
what is the event or what is the instant the shareholders can raise these queries?
Actually, in the annual general meeting, they can raise the queries on the company performance, and even they can pass a resolution if the major shareholders or majority shareholders wanted to change the director, wanted to have any sort of if they are having concerns, they can bring the resolution on that. So they are giving chance also, but there are some procedures. Maybe they have to inform 14 days before the annual general meeting, and there may be some procedure. But still, if major shareholders wants, they can raise the raise the question on business activities and performance of the company, as well as even at the extreme case, they can bring us resolutions for a particular issue. These annual general meetings are one of the main of the sort of platform for shareholders to raise these issues. Are you all convinced the answer? Okay. Then this board of directors, shareholders, even though they don't have the direct, if I precisely mention the answer, the board of the shareholders, they even though they don't have any framework to measure the performance of a director, but generally the key shareholders or main shareholders measure the performance of the directors through the annual reports and financial performance and other reports. And if there are issues, they can raise at the annual general meeting. Even at a worst case or extreme case, they can bring the resolution. They can bring a resolution on the particular issue. That may be the answer for the questions raised by the students. Okay, any questions? Okay, then the other one is, it says the responsibility of the board composition, which is we have in the last class we have studied about the board composition in a broader way. But since the central bank, the bank supervision direction is sort of rule based, it's precisely mentioned, okay, the board of directors, how much the minimum board director should be there, how much the maximum board should be there, and what is the composition of executive and non-executive director, everything is given here. Generally, it says that, the direction says that number of directors shall not be less than 7 and not more than 13. Okay, so in a bank board, the director number of directors can be between 7 to 30. Okay, it's a precisely mentioned. So actually, any of the bank can't appoint the 20 board of directors, because the direction is the corporate governance rules is precisely say it should be less than 30. And the second one is, period of service of a director shall not exceed 9 years except CEO. Okay, so what they are saying is a director can serve in a board for maximum 9 years, but this won't be applicable to CEOs. Okay, and executive director shall not exceed 1/3 of the number of directors. Okay, if the total the executive directors, who are the executive directors? The directors, those who are involving day-to-day operation of the bank. Okay, those who are called as a executive director. They say that total number of executive directors shall not exceed 1/3 of the total number of directors. If it is a total number of directors 12, then executive directors can be maximum 4, 1/3. Okay, it should not be exceed 1/3 of the executive director, total number of directors. Okay, if it is a 3 director totally, maximum, total number of directors are 9, then maximum 3 directors can be executive director. And then they say that board shall have at least three independent non-executive directors, or 1/3 of the total number of directors, whichever higher. Get the point? The board shall have at least 3 independent non-executive directors. It means 3 independent directors, or 1/3 of the total number of directors, whichever higher. Okay. So, for example, if total number of directors are 12, okay, how many directors, no, independent directors should be there in the board? In a bank, total number of directors are 12. Okay. How many independent directors should be there? Based on this point, the board shall have at least 3 independent non-executive directors, or 1/3 of the total number of directors, whichever higher. So, in case if there are only the maximum total number of directors are 12, how many independent directors are there? Actually, independent non-executive and independent directors are same. So, how many independent directors can be there?
4. 4.
4. The right answer. Actually, the 4 is the right answer, because at least 3. Okay, then 3 we can compare. If it is 12, 1/3, whichever higher. So 1/3 will be the higher. So 4 will be the number if it is 12. If it is 9, of course, 3 can be satisfied. Okay. So in this by these rules, they are the central bank indirectly decide the composition. So 1/3 should be executive directors, and 1/3 should be independent directors, and 1/3 can be other non-executive directors. So generally, 2/3 people should be non-executive, 1/3 should be executive. Okay, out of 2/3, the 1/3 will be independent director. So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. This will be ideal composition to the bank. All directors' appointment to fill the casual vacancy shall be subject to election by shareholders. Okay, for example, in the middle of the year, a director can be appointed because there may be vacancy, cashier vacancy. So through that vacancy, a director can be appointed. But that appointment has to be endorsed by shareholders at the annual general meeting. Okay. Okay, all the directors' appointment to any director can be appointed for a casual vacancy in the middle of the year, but that appointment is a subject to the endorsement of shareholders at the annual general meeting, or election by the annual general meeting. If the annual general meeting shareholders say no, then that appointment will not be valid. A director and employee of the bank shall not appointed as a director of the another bank except subsidiary of associates. It's an important thing. a bank director, a director of the bank cannot be the director of other bank, except it is a subsidiary or associate. Okay, so one person cannot simply say that one person cannot be a director of two banks, except if it is that bank is not a subsidiary or associate. Okay, in that case, I just like to why this rule is imposed by, or why the central bank says that a director of a bank shall not be appointed as a director of a bank in the other bank. Why this
Competition.
rule? Sorry.
Competition.
Not exactly. Competition is one reason. You are directly closing the answer, but
Conflict of interest.
yes, exactly. The conflict of interest is our answer. I think in the first class, even when we are studying the combustion, in the first class, I think first, second, or third class, we have studied about the one director, the one person cannot be the director of two banks because conflict of interest. When he has to, because he may know the information of one bank and he can use that information to other bank, and same reverse can applicable to also. So that's why a director employee of the bank should not be other bank. But they say that if it is a subsidiary associate, then within the group, then they can have it, because the objective will be within the group. Okay. Here the independent director is explained here. The independent director, non-executive director shall not be considered as an independent director. Here, very stringent rule. We have seen that independent director rules, but here there are some more stringent rules and precisely say that non-executive director shall not be considered independent if he or she has the direct and indirect shareholding more than 1% of the bank. Okay, that is, somebody asked these questions. I said that generally the 10% can be considered as a major shareholding, but in case of bank, it says that central bank says that it is more than 1%, then he or she cannot be considered as an independent director. And currently has or had during the last 2 years period preceding appointment any business transaction with the bank, then he cannot be the independent director. Business transaction mean any major transaction. For example, if they are having the saving account, of course, no. But if it is a major transaction, and the particular he or she has been employed by the bank during the last 2 years period preceding the appointment as a director, then he cannot be considered as an independent director. As a close relation with a director, CEO, or member of key management, or material shareholder of the bank or another bank, he cannot be considered as an independent director. Represents a specific shareholder of the bank, then he cannot be considered as an independent director. Is an employee or director or material shareholder in a company or business organization which has material transaction with the bank, then he cannot be considered as an independent. So actually, there are questions about the independent director. Who is independent director? Then you have to say non-executive director shall not, and non-executive director shall not be considered if she or he has the director. So you have to write these conditions. I think I just wanted to give us some practical knowledge. One of the bank, sorry, I can't mention the name. One of the bank, the article of association mentioned that if a shareholder has 10% shareholding of particular bank, then he can claim a directorship. Okay, in that case, if for example X is having the 10% of the shareholding and he appoint a person Y as a director of that bank because of that shareholding, then he cannot be considered as an independent director. That's why it says that one before the last represent a specific shareholder, stakeholder of a bank, then he cannot be considered as an independent. This is another important thing you'll have to understand, because there are questions in the exam papers. Fit and proper test of a director, assessing the fit and proper of the directors. Actually, generally, when a director is getting appointed to the bank and a senior officer is appointed, senior management person is appointing to the bank, before appointed, they just send a fit and proper test to the central bank or bank supervision department, where they have to mention all the information, his experiences, qualification, his background, and everything has to mention. And based on that information, central bank supervision department will evaluate that person whether he is a fit and proper person to be as a director of a bank. And once the central bank grant the approval only, then that person can be appointed as a director of a bank. So that is called assessing fit and proper of a director. Recently, the central bank issued very precise format where all the information is asking, so they have to fill that form and they have to provide the information and make the declaration that the information given here is true. And one of the fit and proper requirement is the director, a person who serve as a director shall not exceed 70 years. If it is a director's age is more than 70 years, then he is not a fit and proper person to be a director. And other one is the director. He's also director of other more than 20 companies. Then he cannot be considered as a director of fit and proper person to be a director of that company. But except not except, actually inclusive subsidiaries and associate of the bank. So actually, why this direction is being brought is because if a person is more than 20 company, a director has a more than 20 company, then he can't pay attention to the banking business. That is the main purpose. So the first two is that the person proposed to appoint an elected nominated as a director of a licensed bank shall submit an affidavit before such person is appointed to designated a post as a licensed bank. And purpose of obtaining affidavit of directors of licensed bank is to enable the bank supervision department to assess their fitness and propriety in terms of provision of the Banking Act. And it says that fit and proper of a key management person also assess at the following circumstances. When he is currently in the office, so he is serving as a key management person at the time of appointed as a permanent or contract basis, at the time of renewal of employment contract, at any time where there are supervisory concern in respect of any officer as may be determined by the director bank supervision. So they have to submit the information for assess of fit and proper. Okay, this is about the fit and proper. Do you have any questions? Because why I'm asking is this is sort of important area. I think several times there are questions in the exam past papers. So if you have any questions, you all can ask. Okay, due to time, I'm just moving that. Then key management personnel. Okay, I asked you all that key management personnel. These designation, these people are considered as one of the key management personnel. Additional general manager, senior deputy general manager, assistant general manager, and chief operating officer, accountant, chief financial officer, chief internal auditor, compliance officer, and head of treasury, head of legal, and head of information technology, board secretary, and officer serving as a consultant can be considered as a key management personnel. So these people, when they are these people are getting appointed, or when these people contract are getting renewed, at the time they have to send the fit and proper information for the fit and proper test. Okay. Other one is the management function delegated by the board. The board may delegate the management function to the board subcommittees, CEO, executive officer, and personnel. Because this is generally we know everybody, but this is again re-emphasize that board of directors can delegate the management function to the board, because board cannot take responsibility of all the functions. They have to, obviously they have to delegate the function. But directors shall carefully study and clearly understand the delegation arrangement. They can't just delegate it and all. So they have to have very clear understanding of what are the functions they are delegating, what are the powers are giving, and all the things has to be clearly, delegation arrangement has to be clearly studied. The board shall review the delegation process on a periodic basis. So once they delegate, they have to, what they have to do is okay, but they are, whether they are functioning properly, and that has to be reviewed periodically. For example, if we take the risk management function, what they will do is the board of directors will delegate the function to the risk oversight committee and chief risk officer. So time to time, they are getting the report from that risk oversight committee and chief risk officer, and they will review whether the delegation process and it's properly functioning. And the board shall not delegate any matters to an extent that such delegation would significantly hinder or reduce the ability of a board as a whole to discharge its function. It's an obvious. For example, the board delegate the functions, and if they feel that the delegation will affect the power of the boards or discharge the function of the board, then they can't delegate it. It means they can't say that I have delegated but I couldn't monitor it and all. They can't say so. The chairman and chief executive officer. This, of course, we have discussed in the general international best practices also. Here also, it is clearly mentioned that role of chairman and CEO shall be separated and shall not be performed by same individual. Here, it's a rule base. It is compulsory that they can't. The chairman and CEO post cannot be performed by one officer or same individual. But in case of SEC's rules, they said that it is preferable, or international best practice, it says that it's preferable. But if they could not comply, they can just say to the shareholders, this is the reason I could not comply. We could not comply, so there can be one person. But in the bank supervision direction or central bank directions, it's a rule-based direction. It is compulsory. There should be two different person for a chairman and CEO's post. First thing. And the second one is chairman shall be a non-executive director and preferably an independent director. Okay, there's a sort of leeway. There is no executive person cannot be the chairman, but it should be a non-executive director. But they say that preferably an independent director is a better. And chairman shall provide leadership to the board and ensure that board work effectively and discharge its responsibility, which we have already discussed several times. That's because the conducting the business of the board is the responsibility of the chairman. And chairman has to give the leadership to the board and ensure that the board is effectively functioning. The chairman shall ensure that all directors are properly briefed on issues arise at the board meeting. Why they are saying so is because because they are expecting that chairman should get the contribution from all the directors for a decision making function. To get the contribution of the all the directors for decision making, obviously the people has to be informed on the issues. So the chairman shall ensure the all directors are properly briefed on the issues arising at the board meeting. The chairman shall facilitate the effective contribution of non-executive directors. Why it is mentioning here is, in the banks, generally the executive directors are trying to dominate the board. So the chairman, because they are having the practical knowledge of the banking business. So it says that chairman shall facilitate the effective contribution of non-executive directors as well. The chief executive officer shall function as the apex executive in charge of the day-to-day management of the bank's operation and business, obviously. Okay, before going to the some committees appointed by the board, if you have any questions on dividing the chairman and chief executive officers' roles and their duties and responsibilities, you can ask. Any questions? Okay. The board we say that based on the size of the bank, the board of directors can appoint several committees. Okay. If it is a global banks, they may have several committees. But if it is a large bank or national large bank, they have number of committees. If it is a small bank, they may have small number of committees. It is depend on the bank size and their complexity of their operations. They may have number of committees. It is matter of forming the committee and delegate the power. But the central bank code of corporate governance mentioned that at least they must have 4 board committees in their operations. The first one is audit committee. Second one is human resources and remuneration committee. Third one is nomination committee. The fourth one is integrated risk management committee. Each committee shall report directly to the board. A report of the performance on each committee at the annual general meeting should be submitted. Okay, so this is basic requirement, but it does not limit the number of committees in a bank. If a bank wanted to have a complaints committee separately, they can have some complaints committee, but at least they has to have these 4 committees. The audit committee function, chairman of the committee shall be an independent and non-executive director. Why it is so? The independent and why an executive director cannot be appointed as a chairman? Because then if there will be a conflict of, there may be a conflict of interest. That's why it's emphasized that chairman of the committee shall be an independent non-executive director.
Executive director may be a staff of the bank, no?
Sorry?
Executive director may be a staff of the bank management.
Yeah, executive director means a staff of the banks who involve the day-to-day operation of the banks. Then if it is for example, it may be DGM or it may be AGM or chief executive of a CEO. These people can be these people are the executive directors. They can be they are involving day-to-day operations. And if those people are appointed as a chairman of the audit committee, then there will be a conflict of interest. For example, assume that audit credit AGM, DGM, appointed as a chairman of the audit committee. And what will happen if something goes wrong in the credit operations? he may have the hesitation to escalate that risk to that findings to the board of directors. He may try to hide it. So that's why, okay, to avoid that sort of conflict of interest, it says that chairman of the committee shall be an independent non-executive director. Because, okay, non-executive directors is fine, but if it is independent, it is an more cushion. And member of the committee shall be non-executive directors. That is obvious. So you may understand why they are saying it's to avoid the conflict of interest. And committee shall make recommendation on the matters in connection with appointment of the external auditor, implementation of central bank guidelines, and application of relevant accounting standard, and service period, audit fee, and resignation of external auditor. With regard to those matters, audit the committee shall make recommendation to the board. And committee shall review the financial information of the bank, because it means the audit committee has the power to review the financial statements and their performance and all, and they can submit a report. And committee shall discuss issues, problem, and reservations arising from the interim and financial audit, and review the adequacy of the scope, function, and resources of the internal audit department is also the committee's function. And I think the internal audit the internal audit committee function we have already seen, and some of these we have already seen in that slide as well. And human resources and remuneration committee. This is one of the other committee which is central bank, the bank super and corporate governance issue direction emphasized to have this committee by all the banks. And this human resource committee is in charge to determine the remuneration policy relating to directors, CEO, and key management personnel, and set the goals and target for the directors and CEO and key management, and evaluate the performance of CEO and key management, and determine the basis for revising the remuneration. And CEO shall be present at all meetings of the committee except when matters relating to CEO are being discussed. Okay, so this is one of the committee which is related to handling the this performance and remuneration of the CEO, key management personnel, as well as the directors, particularly the remuneration, determining the remuneration.
Staff remuneration also decided by them?
Not exactly. No, this human resource and remuneration committees generally it is handling the directors, CEOs, and key management personnel. Because why it doesn't say anything about the staff remunerations? Because there can be a manipulations or malpractices on deciding the remuneration of directors, CEOs, and key management personnel. So that's why the corporate governance direction says that when they are then deciding this remuneration of directors, CEOs, and all, they have to the remuneration committee has to deal with it. And I think you would have remember that when we are saying that, for example, in this committee there may be directors, but when their remunerations are discussed at this point, and they have to abstain from this from the discussion. Actually, these rules are mainly to avoid any malpractices and any fraud or anything. This remuneration of, and in Sri Lanka banks, you can observe that human resource cost is one of the highest expenses in the banking industry. Nomination committee. This is, we have seen that to appointment the directors and all, the committee shall implement a procedure to select or appoint new directors, CEO, and key management personnel. Actually, appointing the new directors and key management personnel is an important process. So that's why this direction emphasize that there should be an independent committee. Independent means the board subcommittee for this nomination, the function as a nomination committee, and set the criteria such as qualification, experience required for appointment to the post of CEO and key management personnel. The committee shall ensure that director, CEO, and key management personnel are fit and proper person to hold office. Actually, they can send some information to the central bank for the getting assess the fit and proper. Sometimes the bank itself or company itself may have separate policies to nominate the 1 minute. Okay, separate policies to have a fit and proper of the directors and key management person. For example, central bank may say that okay, central bank corporate governance direction says that 70 is the minimum age, but the bank may have the most stringent one, 65. Okay, so the committee shall ensure the directors, key management personnel are fit and proper to hold the office. And the committee shall chair by the independent director and preferably be constituted with a majority of independent directors. Actually, this is again one of the important area. That's why they emphasize that the independent directors should comprise the committee. So here, if you see that earlier, for the audit committee also non-executive director and independent non-executive director. Here it says that chairman should be the independent director and preferably majority of independent directors should be in the committee. And that's all about the, finally, integrated risk management committee. This is we have seen in the risk management, when we are discussing on the risk management functions. Committee shall consist at least 3 non-executive directors, CEO and key management supervising broad risk categories. So it says that the non-executive directors, 3 non-executive directors, CEOs and key management supervising the board risk categories, and assess all risk and one of the function, and review the adequacy and effectiveness of all management level committees, and meet at least quarterly to assess the whole aspect of risk management. Actually, here also they have to have at least a quarter meeting, the board risk oversight committee, and take actions against the officers responsible for failure to identify the risk, and submit a risk assessment report to the board seeking the board's view, and establish a compliance function to assess the compliance. Actually, here of course it's mentioned that compliance function should be established by the integrated risk management function committee. But in some banks, actually, if it is a large global banks, they are having the compliance function separately. Okay, that's all about the 4 committees. Any doubt you all want to ask? Actually, again, this as a last item, this central bank corporate governance direction says about the disclosure requirements. It says that ensure that annual audit financial statement and quarterly financial statements are prepared and published. Okay, anybody working in the bank can answer the question, what is the requirement on publishing quarterly financial statement by the bank? You may see that in the papers, the bank has to publish or the banks are publishing their quarterly financial statements. I think if you are working in the bank, you may know that every quarter in a prescribed form, these banks has to publish their quarterly statements in all 3 language papers. At least they have to prepare 1 English, 1 Tamil, 1 in Sinhala papers. So all 3 language papers. Why it is required is because the depositors has to assess the it is expected that the stakeholders has to see the financial performance of the particular bank. So that's why it's a disclosure requirement says that ensure that annual audited financial statement and quarterly financial statements are prepared and published. And quarterly financial statement they have to publish in the press paper. And a report by the board on the bank's internal control mechanism has to be submitted in basically in the annual report. And detail of directors including names, fit and proper transaction with banks and total fees and remuneration paid to the directors has to be disclosed in the annual report. A report setting out the detail of compliance and prudential requirement, regulations and law has to be published. And a statement of the regulatory supervisory concern, lapses in the bank's risk management, non-compliance with these direction has to be published. These are very straightforward things. I just read it, and any question you can ask, otherwise just as a final one before the final in the corporate governance, we have said that okay, on behalf of the stakeholders, it is a duty of the board of directors to manage the or to control the particularly the manage and direct the particular company. Okay. So we have seen what is the role of CEO, what is the role of chairman, what is the role of senior management and their responsibilities and all, what are the things and everything. But finally, we have to see what is the responsibility of the shareholders or role of the shareholders with respect to corporate governance. Because as I said, primary people, they are the people, they are the owners of the company, they must have some role. First one is have the right to examine the records and financial statements. If they want, if as a shareholder, if they wanted to examine the records of a company or financial statement, they have that right based on the corporate governance. And they have the entitled to vote at the general meeting. If any issues come for a vote, they have the entitled to vote at the general meeting. And the third one, which we have discussed in this class, they can elect the directors at the general meeting. So actually, by the vote, or they can anonymously, or they can by the vote, they can elect the directors. If the majority of the shareholders say no, then they can't appoint the directors. And decide on fundamental changes in the complex. For example, companies, for example, mergers or acquisition. So the fundamental changes of a company, then what they have, shareholders has the right to decide on that and can make proposal on company's matter. So by resolution, they can propose. These are actually once, I think not recently, but earlier, there was a question about the shareholders' role in the corporate governance. Then you may have to write these things. And at the last slide, I just wanted to highlight some corporate governance issues, and it is for the exam point of view also, it's an important. These are the issues we can observe in the corporate governance of a bank or finance institution. First one is conflict of interest created through related party transaction and day-to-day activities. This is one of the important things in the corporate governance issue, corporate conflict of interest. When they are appointing a committees or when they are in charge for senior management getting in charge for some certain functions or any related party transactions, conflict of interest could be created. This is one of the most important issue in the corporate governance. And lack of capabilities to oversight the company activities is other thing. Actually, even though bank of directors are uh, appointed as a with the capability and experience, education and all, but in the changing environment, all the directors are not having the proper capability to oversight the company activities, particularly some special skill areas like risk management and all. So that is one of the other issue we can see. And dishonesty among the management and employees of the company is a common. I think I need not to explain your much. Dishonesty is one of the main issue in the corporate governance. And ethical behavior of directors and senior actually is an issue. Ethical because these people are reluctant to have an ethical behavior. Sometimes they are compromising the ethical, unethical. They are just compromising ethical behavior, doing some unethical thing, which may not be then illegal. Actually, the people has to have an understanding that there are two things. One is illegal, one is unethical. People say that okay, it's not illegal, but what you have to see is whether it's an ethical to do it. So the ethical behavior of directors and senior management is one of the other issue we can observe in the corporate governance. And irresponsible use of power by the top management in an activity of a company when in the day-to-day activities or policy making things, some senior management or top management using their power irresponsible way, that also create a issue in the corporate governance. And reluctant to maintain transparency in the company's activity. Actually, it's our cultural issue in the country like Sri Lanka. The transparency is very not an expected level. So it is common for a corporate governance as well. The company directors are reluctant to maintain the transparency in the company's activity. They are just thinking that why we should disclose to the people. Okay, they are investing, we are giving profit, and why should we disclose? Actually, that transparency mentality is one of the issue. And reluctant to take responsibilities and accountability. Okay, everybody wants the power, but they are not ready. They are hesitating to take the responsibilities and accountability. So these are the some of the issues we can find related to the corporate governance. I think with that, I'm going to this. I just really include one question paper. I think this time is close to that. So I'm not going to discuss this because we will discuss some more papers before winding up this session or this semester. So at that time we can cover these corporate governance issues as well, past papers. Okay, if you have any questions, you can ask. Actually, if I summarize it, we have discussed about in the today's class. We have discussed about the corporate governance rules of Securities and Exchange Commission, and then we have discussed about the central bank one. Actually, if in the exam you can give more prominent to the central bank one because which is applicable to the banks and financial institutions, you can answer the questions. And other than that, finally, we have seen some corporate governance issues. Any doubt you all wanted to ask? Sir, corporate governance issue slide is not included in the chart presentation. Have they not shared this presentation?
They have shared it, sir. Unfortunately, the final slide is missing and the question slide.
Yes. I'll ask them to slide. Actually, this is I have included yesterday night, so I will just ask them to chat.
Thank you, sir.
Give me a minute. Okay, if you don't have any questions, then I will wind up the class today. And actually, in this FAM subject, there are 2 people taking the class. Some specialized areas are taken by Mr. Gamanayaka. So sometimes he may start the class from next Saturday onwards, and he will continue 5 classes and cover 2 topics, 2 or 3 topics. So, and after that, I will again rejoin and I will continue the balance 2 or 3 topics. Okay. So, next class, of course, most probably Mr. Kamanayaka will continue the class. Okay. If you don't have any questions, I'll wind up the class.